take it we're now in debate and we're wrapped up with questions, we're debating. Well, I just wanted, all right, well, that waits very patiently for the appropriate time. You know, with youth unemployment where it's at today, with youth homelessness where it's at today, and with a society that is yet to be re-architected, new adjective, re-architected, to adequately reflect the needs and the aspirations of youth, there can never be enough youth advocacy. And at the end of the day, that's what divides this council, 9-2. It's what unites the two on the other side. They feel that you can have enough youth advocacy. In fact, they feel that youth advocacy, no matter how much, is too much, and that's why they chopped, eliminated, severed, amputated the child and youth advocate position. One of the darkest days of this city council. But for every dark day, there is a beautiful dawn. For every negative day, a positive day. And one of my most exciting days, a couple of years ago, early days of our new term, a brand new progressive majority, a COPE majority on city council. We believe in a youth-friendly city, but we don't just talk the talk, we've walked the talk, and we reinstituted the position. If ever there were any doubt as to the wisdom of that decision, we need look no further than the report that's before us today, and at the author of the report who is before us today. An advocate who believes in real advocacy, empowerment of youth, youth empowerment, the need to empower youth, to create youth networks, to outreach to youth, and who is not hesitant to speak up when speaking up is necessary, as it is with one of our other departments, the department I've sometimes referred to in the past as the road department. We have an outstanding advocate, a great report. Let's not nickel and dime it to death. Let's not talk about whether or not this dollar or that dollar could be extracted from some other source. Let's do everything we can to encourage not less advocacy, but more advocacy, so that at some point down the road, we can actually say that we do have a youth-friendly society where youth unemployment rates are no higher than the norm, where youth homelessness is a thing of the past. And when we reach that day, I'll be very, very pleased to second the motion to eliminate the position of the youth advocate. But until then, more is better, less is worse, and let's keep funding what needs to be funded.
Councillor Whitworth.
Well, just so we can follow procedure, I'd like to move recommends A and B as amended. And may I speak to this? Briefly, I think that the child youth advocate and the youth advocate mentor have been most eloquent. The report is very comprehensive and thorough and highlights many significant issues from housing to MCFD changes, youth and police, drug prevention, Aboriginal children and youth, which I think that we need to maybe put a bit of a more of an eyes on and see if we can do more in working with Kaya and other organizations. Child care, early childhood development, advocacy planning. I think the plans to move forward on some action on these areas of concern are excellent, and I look forward to hearing from you after the November conference. And thank you both for your great work.
Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan.
Well, to Councillor Lewis's rant, I was in fact part of a government that did create the child and youth advocate position and eliminated it. And not so much eliminated, but converted it to another position that actually was involved in service, not advocacy. And that was a conscious decision at the time. The provincial government had taken our child and youth advocate and brought her onto the provincial scene to be the provincial child and youth advocate. And I do believe there is a point to say that when the provincial government eliminated that position, perhaps the existence of this position was more warranted. But I do not believe that that should negate the constant effort to try to make sure we get good value for our money. So I do believe, I didn't mean that our advocates should be running around fundraising all the time. I meant that there could be other agencies that would take on some of these initiatives. These are eminently fundable as far as I can see, and I do believe that we should always make sure we're getting good value for our money. Thank you.
I'd just like to comment, yet again, we see Councillor Sullivan and the two sides. You know, I really, really believe in children, but, you know, why don't you go someplace else to try and figure out how to do this? In fact, when they got rid of the youth advocate position in Victoria, there was an opportunity by this council, not this one, but the previous council, to step back into it, and they didn't. I too want to see value for our money, and that's why I passed that amendment, to see value for our money, to be able to hear the advocate come back next year and say, here's where your money went, and here's where we are in the process, and here's where we want to go. That's value for money. But, you know, the idea that you didn't ask for begging, maybe perhaps Councillor Sullivan can vote and help you find those other agencies, and it would make life a lot easier for you and obviously for Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Ladner.
Well, I guess one of the differences between some of the people in this council and others is that some would want to spend an unending amount of money on advocacy, and others are concerned with delivering services and providing results. And what concerns me about this money is the fact that we're already spending $150,000 on advocacy, and I would wager that you could bring any amount of money to this council and say you want to spend more money on the Child and Youth Advocacy Program, and there would be no resistance, because, as Councillor Lewis had said, there's no limit to how much advocacy is good advocacy. So we could be spending who knows how much amount of money, and I think it's our job to be tough-minded about whether we're getting value for this money and looking at where we spend this money. I was quite happy to add $150,000 to child care services that we voted for at the last meeting I attended, but I don't see any direct services to children and youth coming out of this money, whereas I do see some services coming out of the absorption of the child and youth advocates' work from the previous administration into the bureaucracy, where we're spending this, we have $500,000 or $600,000 on services. And to me, that is value for money. That's what we should be after. And I would be quite happy to spend $80,000 on detox beds for youth, or child care housing. But to spend it on networking and schmoozing events and dialoguing, I don't think is a priority. And I don't think, I'm quoting from the report here, I don't think is the priority. And I think we should challenge the Child and Youth Advocate to find the money with the existing programs and with her existing budget, which is quite, $150,000 is a significant amount of money. And I like the fact that one of these programs, as Councillor Sullivan has pointed out, is validated by support from another agency, the Vancouver Foundation, and I think that's a great thing. And that's the kind of challenge I think we should put forward. If indeed these are worthwhile things and somebody's advocating for them, rather than come to a council that's quite happy to say any amount of money you want will give you, find support in the community, as the Park Board does and so many of these other agencies do, to justify the importance of this program and make them happen. And I think the police should be held to account for the fact that there's an issue with police and youth, and the police should be advocated to come up with the money out of their very plentiful budget. And I know the mayor sits on the police board, and I don't know why he wouldn't go and ask the police for a mere $25,000 to enable
Because you didn't give them enough the last time.
some proper discussion between youth and police, which is obviously needed. I'm quite happy to support the Aboriginal Youth Alliance and different groups that we do through the funding, but I just have a problem with piling on the money for advocacy when we are short of services and short of money to pay for those services. That's where I would like to see the money go.
Councillor Green.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't going to speak on this. I didn't think it'd be necessary, but of course it is again. Well, we've heard advocacy confused with fundraising to begin with, from Councillor Ladner. Advocacy as schmoozing. I guess it is if you're advocating for golf courses and marinas, but when you're advocating for children, it's a different thing. So we heard last time that we had a debate over children and youth and seniors and culture. Councillor Ladner doing exactly the same thing. Oh, I support all these things. I just don't support giving them money. We're developing the most sustainable community in the world perhaps, and Councillor Ladner supports it, but doesn't think it costs any money. So it's the same thing over and over again. And there's only a couple of conclusions I can get. Now, he's told us over and over again he cares for children, so I won't challenge him on that, but perhaps he doesn't understand that children require support. They require advocacy more than they do probably anything else, because it's that advocacy that got services for children and got recognition for children. And if it wasn't for that advocacy, we wouldn't have a lot of the things we do today. If it wasn't for mothers advocating for daycare, we wouldn't have it today. It doesn't fall from the sky. It is worked on by people in the real world. And you're worried about that this council will spend any amount of money? We heard one of the people here in support saying every dollar might save a life. I think that's worth it. I think it's worth saving a few thousand people's lives. And I trust that that position was well taken by the speaker. So, Councillor Ladner, I want to again thank you for staying in the groove, keeping the NPA spirit alive, if nothing else.
Councillor Roberts.
Yes, I think Councillor Green has eloquently said most of what I had to say. Is that I think that we just have to be very clear here that often the reason we need an advocate is because there have been problems. That because really our society often doesn't value children and put children in the kind of center of where children should be. That there are issues with families that can't necessarily provide for the kids, or the society doesn't fund the education system or the social system in a way that would adequately meet the needs of children. So we have to then, we can't just fill in the gap and provide all those services ourselves. We're a city government. We can't, we try, we do what we can, we do make a difference where we can, but ultimately we don't have the resources to provide those services. So what we have to do is change the way government works, change the way our society works, change the orientation of where we do and what we do for children. And it's through the work of, I think, the Child and Youth Advocate, our child care coordinator, and other people in the city, along with the kind of organizations out in the community, and that by our working together, we actually bring about change. And that is worth funding. It is like a parallel with our homelessness plan. Yes, people need shelters, but in the end, if we put our resources just in shelters, we're not going to be housing people. We're not going to be solving the problems of homelessness. We're not going to be creating homes for people. And this is the very same kind of parallel, is that we don't just focus on putting the services in place or the band-aids or that. We get at what is the real problems and what do we bring about the solutions. And for that, this is a relatively small amount of money to put us in that orientation of making the changes that put children first in our society.
Councillor Lewis.
Well, I just wanted to comment very briefly on the phrase that was used by Councillor Ladner. If I recall correctly, it was networking and schmoozing. You know, it was said in such a way as to leave the very distinct impression that there was something absolutely wrong about the fact that youth and youth advocates might dare to network and schmooze. Of course, if it's the business community networking and schmoozing, well, that's fantastic. Some of the very best networkers take out ads in a newspaper I've seen here and there, Business in Vancouver, promoting networking, seminars on how better to network, marketing and networking as a means to market. It's fine for networking to take place when it's business owners networking to promote business. Why would it not also be absolutely fantastic, in fact even better, far better, if it's youth advocates and people involved in youth issues who are networking to solve the problems that youth face? But then the answer suddenly occurred to me. I suddenly realized who it was I was listening to. I was listening to the man who just a few weeks ago stood up in council and spoke and voted against the Vancouver Public Library's request for a very modest amount of money for the Ready for Reading program, a program so radical in nature that it might actually bring books to children. It might actually increase the number of children within Vancouver primarily low-income children that would have access to books. Such an incredibly radical idea that Councillor Ladner voted against it. So when I recalled that, it suddenly became clear, and I now understand why he's not only opposed to children reading, he's even opposed to child advocates networking.
Councillor Lewis, just clarification, you actually read Business in Vancouver? Okay. Just, I wanted to check that out. Okay, Councillor Ladner.
Just so I can clear up for the record, for Councillor Lewis, I don't know if he was dozing during that meeting, but I moved a smaller increase, but an increase for that program, for the children's outreach. When it was defeated, I voted in favor of the program. So if you could just keep the record straight on that, thank you.
That was the 50% day, right? Where you just wanted to cut everything by 50% across the board. Seeing no further comments, all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Councillor Ladner and Sullivan. Motion's carried.